graders! Today's lesson is lesson 116 on compound interest. So our first vocab word is called principal. And we're not talking about Mr. Peretti here. We're talking about when we go to the bank and we have a starting amount of money, that is our principal. So if I walked into a bank and I had $10,000 that I wanted to deposit, that is called my principal. It's what I'm starting with. It's what is going to go into the account to start. The next word, hopefully you guys are familiar with, is called interest. So interest is a percentage of the principal. It's a percentage of the money that we're starting with. And interest can be good or it can be bad. If I am trying to invest money, then interest is really good. So if I go to the bank and I put money in a savings account and it gets 1% interest, then that means that my money, my principal, is going to be earning more money, which we call interest. On the other hand, if I take out a loan, then if that loan is going to, say I take out $5,000 for my loan, it's going to get interest, and the interest is bad because it means that I have more money that I have to pay back at the end. So there's two types, actually there's many different types of interest, but we're going to talk about two specific types of interest. The first type is called simple interest, and it's called simple interest because it's kind of simple. The formula is I, stands for interest, equals P times R times T. So this is kind of like the volume formula where you're just going to multiply three numbers together. The principal, our starting amount, which is down here. The R, which is the rate. The rate is always the percent. So like if I say at 6% interest or at 12% or at 1%, but you're going to write it as a decimal. So if it's 6%, for example, that rate would be 0.06. Or if it's 25%, then that would be 0.25 or 0.25. And then our final thing is the time. So that's just the amount of years that we're talking about. Okay? So find the simple interest. We've got $100. What is this $100? It's our principal. At 6% for 3 years. So to show you kind of what this is going to look like here, I wrote out first year, second year, third year of what the interest for each of those years is going to be to find the total. So first thing we got to do is we got to find what's 6% of 100. And how do I do that? Well, to find the percent of a number, we just multiply times it as a decimal, right? So here we've got 0, 0, 6, and this number is a 0, so I don't have to do that row, and we have 2 behind the decimals. So what's my answer? My answer is $6. So there's going to be $6 of interest the first year. And then the second year, we're going to have another $6 of interest. And then the third year, we're going to have another $6 of interest. So altogether, how much interest am I going to have paid? I'm going to have 6 plus 6 plus 6, which is 18. So it would have been $18 of interest. And when I add that to my principal, I'm going to end up either earning or paying back $118. All right, let's look at it just using the formula, which is what you'll do in future grades. If they want to know how much interest it is each year, you've got to write it out. If they just want to know the total balance after 3 years, then I can just multiply them. So I've got I equals the principal, which is 100, times the rate, which is 0.06, times 3, which would be 300 times 0.06. Or if I were to use a calculator, I would do 100 times 0.06 times 3. So our interest equals $18, which means our balance equals the 100 plus the 18, which is 118. So I want you to do this one on your own. That way, just so you can show that you understand both ways. All right, page 2, compound interest. Compound interest is where the interest gained each year is added to the principal. So in other words, you get interest on the interest. This is really, really good if we're talking about savings, and really, really bad when we're talking about taking out loans. Unfortunately, every type of loan pretty much that you take out does go based on compound interest. The questions we're going to do say that they're compounded annually, which means that every year it's added to the principal. Sometimes things are compounded monthly or even bi-monthly, which ends up racking up even more interest that you would have to pay back. So here's some examples. They want you to find the balance after the interest is compounded annually. All right, so example A, $100 at 6% for 3 years. So this is our same number. Let's look at what happens here. So for the first year, we already found out that 6% of 100 was $6, right? So we have a starting principal of $100. And the first year, we're going to add the $6. So we're going to add $6. So we're going to end up with $106. But what happens now is for our second year, we need to find what 6% of 106 is. So for that one, you're going to do 106 times 0.06. So now we have an interest of $6.36. So now we're adding $6.36 of interest, which means that our balance after year 2 is going to be to add that to that, which would be $112.36. Now, what do we need to do for year 3? Well, we have to find 6% of $112.36. It's money, so I'm only going to take 2 decimal places. So I have $6.74 is my interest. So $6.74 equals, and now I need to add that to this. Now, my total for here is $119.10. So that is what I'd end up with. So I added some extra interest here by compounding it annually. And this is only at 6% when we had started with $100. When we're talking about a lot more money, this becomes a much bigger thing. So how can we do this with our calculator? So with our calculator, you can just do 100 times 1.06. The 1 is going to add in that 100 for you. And that tells you what it would be the first year. So the first year would be 106. Now we take that answer that we have and we're going to multiply it times 1.06 again. And that tells us what we should get for the second year. And then we just hit times 1.06 again. And that tells us what we should get for our third year or our final year. So the good news is that you are allowed to use calculators, or they want you to learn how to use a calculator to do this in addition. And actually in 7th and 8th grade, you will learn a formula that is even more complicated for compound interest, so you don't have to write them all down. But we're going to do it this way. So let's do one more together here, and then I want you to do one. I use 10%, so that way it would be nice and easy for you to calculate if you didn't have a calculator. So here we've got our principal is $500, and we've got 7%. So what is that as its rate? We're going to multiply it times 1.07. This 1 is going to include in our principal. So now I'm going to start with 500. I'm going to do 500 times 1.07, and I get $535. So after year 1, I'm at $535. $535 times 1.07 again. And now I'm at 572.45. Again. and I'm at $612, and I've got 4 decimal places for money. I only take 2. I'm going to draw a line here. This is a 1, so it'll just drop off. So my answer is going to be $612.52. So what is my balance? My balance is $612.52. All right, you got one more to try on your own. Go ahead and get to work.